But I'm happy to be here tonight. I also, God, boy, I tell you, holding me.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. I appreciate that. Mr. Boucher.
Hi, my name is Paul Butcher. I was born in Green Bay. I grew up in Alloway. I went to St. Matthew's Catholic School, and then I went to a public school at Washington Junior High and East High School. At East High School, I participated in basketball, baseball, golf, and I got varsity letters in track, football, and wrestling. After graduation, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I got my degree in sociology. And I'm a former NCAA athlete. I ran the 400 in Big Ten meets, and after graduation, I came back to Green Bay with a lot of my friends, and we were all graduates from Madison, and there was a lot of opportunities for college graduates. So one by one, we all left, and I moved off to Washington, D.C. to work at Georgetown University, and I helped with their computer conversion, and was promoted to work at the law school on Capitol Hill to help with computer conversion there in the office of the registrar. And I'm also a former model. I have a picture that I can't show you right now, but if anybody wants to see it, now, as far as what I would like to bring for Green Bay, I don't think the other candidates are bringing the change that I would like to bring. Like, what's the heart of Green Bay? In most cities in the United States, they have a college or university at the heart of the city. Our colleges are way outside of the edge of town because of city politics. We need to build a university downtown that's dedicated to diversity and female empowerment, and we need to start with that and build outward, and just about time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thanks, good evening, and thanks for attending. Thank you to the League for hosting the forum. If you look at the stage, there's certainly no shortage of options when you go to the voting booth on February 19th. Every candidate sitting here brings something to the table, and I also believe that each one of us have our flaws. The voters are definitely going to have their work cut out for them making a decision on who will take the reins of the city for the next 4 years. And what do those 4 years look like with Joe Moore as mayor? My primary goal as mayor would be to create 2, 5, and 10-year plans, which not only would improve services, but will reduce the burden levied on taxpayers. Our annual budgeting process works with short-term goals, but I believe we have to have an end-game result that we are trying to achieve. Setting a standard of where we want to be in 5 and 10 years would mean that we begin working to achieve those standards immediately. Included in those plans would be creating and implementing policies to best manage TIF and to get those dollars into the levy as quickly as possible. They also include potential mergers with Green Bay Metro Fire Department that will reduce response times and create efficiencies with our neighboring communities. We will need to work hard to find the right plan for police and fire headquarters. A new headquarters will give Green Bay's best the resources they need to maximize their efficiencies with the correct space and needed technology. However, it cannot be an overwhelming burden on you and I. I want to ensure all businesses, including small mom-and-pop shops and the local entrepreneurs, have the same incentives and opportunities that some of our larger projects have received over the years. Building our tax base is a consistent goal of our planning and economic development departments, and this is one of the very best ways to improve the rate of repair on our roads and our infrastructure. I would like to see the wheel tax expire when it can be offset by the increased revenue from the TIF projects and added tax base while still avoiding assessments. Lastly, our homeless population needs the proper resources to transition back into the community. I feel that public-private partnerships with local shelters and other nonprofit organizations is the best way to get the downtrodden off of the streets and into a safe, consistent life that they may not have felt for years. As mayor, the homeless and the poorest parts of our city will not be an afterthought. I'm looking forward to addressing your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mortensen.
Thank you. My name is Nick Mortensen. I am not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I am not a politician. I'm hoping not to get too much politician on me. I'm 41 years old. I've lived in Green Bay my entire life. College educated, UWGB with a history major. Got 2 kids, 18 months, just about 5 years. And I'm married. I live on the west side. Professionally, I work for Jones Sign Company. What I do there is every year I pick a problem and I put myself through the paces to determine how to solve it. Then I either do solve it, or I get a good estimation of how much money it's going to cost to hire outside to solve that problem. I solve complex problems. I care about data. A few years ago, there was this term, big data. Started learning about that for Jones Sign Company. Took classes online. We all had to use one large data set that was free and open to the open government initiative. And that data was 2002 to 2007, Boston, Massachusetts. We learned a lot about how to do data regressions and things like that. And I couldn't help but think, boy, I really like this to be the Green Bay data. And I went to the city and I asked, hey, can I get a hold of some old stale data from 2002 to 2007? I think I can do some regressions. And they said no, because they just didn't have any apparatus to set that up. And that's why I'm here tonight. I want to change that. We have to bring Green Bay into the present. We are very technologically backwards.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mortensen. Mr. Stoyer?
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Stoyer. I am presently the president of the City Council for Green Bay. I've been on City Council for 7 years, and I am not a native of Green Bay. I moved up from Milwaukee in 1981. I was a cartographer. I don't know if any of you remember what a cartographer is, but mapping specialist. I worked for the City of Green Bay for 26 years. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about is the fact that, okay, I worked for the city for 26 years, but in that time period, I waited on 20 to 25,000 people, customer service. One of the things I think that's very important living in Green Bay is to work with citizens and get them the answers they want. I probably, as an alder for the last 7 years, I've probably taken quite a few hundred calls every month. Bottom line is people want to be heard. They just want to and get the information that they need. One of the things that I'm looking at is I'm very proactive. I've been involved in a lot of things. I'm presently the president of the Brown County Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm on a group called Circles Green Bay that's looking at poverty from another angle. And I can talk more about that later. I also chaired the homelessness task force called HOPE back in 2012 to 2014. I've been involved in a lot of projects over time. The Walmart issue was very big. Gasification, a number of big projects, the Northland Hotel. With that being said, I want to work and make sure that our infrastructure is taken care of and our roads. I'm also into historic preservation as well. We just had a historic district designated in the downtown area. I'm all about adaptive reuse. And real quickly, I was just in Davenport, Iowa, and they've united together as one community. And I want to do that with Green Bay and other communities.
Thank you, Mr. Stoyer. Mr. Henry?
Thank you, and thanks to the League for organizing tonight and for everyone for attending. This is a great turnout for what hopes to be a good discussion tonight. I'm Eric Henrich. I just wrapped up my third term in the State Assembly. Served 6 years down in Madison, representing roughly 3/5 of the people of Green Bay at our state capitol. And as I've said before, it's been the honor of my professional life to have been granted that opportunity. It was great to be able to represent and serve so many people across the city, to learn new things about the community that I was born and raised in and love. And I certainly could have run for election in November, but it's a really pivotal time for the city of Green Bay, in my view. And so I decided not to run for election and instead run to be Green Bay's next mayor. As I've been knocking on doors and having community conversations and coffees all across the city, there are a few issues that have certainly come to the top. And first and foremost, as others have said, we really need to reinvest in our infrastructure, fix our roads, but also I think expand our thinking when we talk about infrastructure. As Nick said, I think there's work to be done on our digital infrastructure. There's investments that we could do in renewable energies, work to be done in investing in parks all across the city of Green Bay, bikes and pedestrian amenities as well. In addition to that, I think I'm excited about where we are as a community, how the economy and community has developed over the last few years, but we need to make sure that people are feeling that benefit all across the city, not just in downtown Green Bay. So it's to expand those investments all the way out to the northeast side, where there's real potential for additional development. Finally, I think the people of Green Bay, as I've heard on the doors and in these meetings, they're really looking for somebody who can lead the city in a respectful, decent, civil way, to have really difficult conversations, but do it in a way that appreciates and respects all perspectives. So those are a few of the issues that I've been talking about throughout this campaign. I look forward to the discussion tonight, and thanks to my fellow candidates for stepping up.
Thank you. Our first question tonight goes back then to Mr. Buckley, okay? And the question is, if you were elected mayor of Green Bay, how big of a priority would city road repair be to you?
City road repair would be a very, very high priority. As I tried to state in my opening, a number of the streets are just downright horrendous. And I really feel that we have to get back to making those a priority in the city of Green Bay. We have to look at what we're going to do this year, next year, 5 years from now, put a comprehensive plan going out 10 years so that we can properly budget and account for what roads can be done. We also need to work with the neighborhoods on where those roads can be done so they are aware of the upcoming issues or traffic problems that may occur. And I really feel that if we look at it and use this problem and attack it, we can get it done. With my background, again, I'm a candidate that gets things done and moves forward to make this the best city to live, work, and retire. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Thank you. If you go to evansformayor.org, you'll see there's a tab on there called the Evans Plan. In there I have 3 items talking about infrastructure, economic development, and community. My number 1 issue is roads, so that just everybody knows that. So over the last 10 years, well actually let's put it this way, over the last 10 years Green Bay's been doing about 1 or 2% of the roads. Before that they were doing 3%. What we need to do is, and I've set this goal of getting back to 3% of roads. That will, stabilize where we're at, and then hopefully that will catch us up. But any more than that, you're going to have some problems because it's just not feasible. But 3% is the mark that we need to be at. It's the number 1 goal that I have. We have a wheel tax in place. I think the wheel tax is a good short-term revenue stream, but that needs to go away. For sure. We've got to get rid of that. So I want to use the budget that we have. So we have the wheel tax, that's a short-term revenue stream, but that's got to go away. Look at the municipalities around us. When they resurface or reconstruct a street, their people pay nothing. So we're going to get rid of the special assessments for good. So Pat Evans's number 1 issue is roads, and we will fix them.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Zimmer?
I just want to remind Mr. Evans that he should give credit where he got those ideas from. He called me up and we talked about it. But I tell you, we've been good friends a long time. I'm happy to talk with him and everybody else.
I do listen, folks.
But, the average bituminous street lasts 30 to 35 years. If you take the upper number, 30 to 35 years, it means you got to do about 3% of your streets every single year, and over time you keep up your infrastructure. This past administration has found ways to pull money out of the budgets that are supposed to serve the people and used it to serve a few. But I don't want to get into past administrations, but we need to get it back up to 3%. He's exactly right. And, you learn something all my life, 40 years I'm here. It was just a few years ago I learned that 90% of the cities in the state of Wisconsin don't have assessments, and that's always been a block. People don't have a lot of money all at once. Not everybody has it. So isn't it better we all pay $20, $30 more a year on our taxes, and we never have to worry about a big assessment. We never have to vote against making improvements because we don't have money. I think we need to take $4 off of this wheel tax and get rid of it, use that money to shore back up our funds and start paying the bills from where the taxes are coming from, not by continuing to tax more and more and more.
Thank you.
So, excuse me, Ms. Mayoral, is it, do we, for the answers, the time, is it 2 minutes or is it 90 seconds or what is it? I mean,
It's 1.5 minutes, 90 minutes.
90 seconds.
90
Okay, I just wanted
seconds,
to
right.
clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Boucher?
All too often politicians tend to find out what their budget is and they think that's concrete. If we can find ways to create revenue, roads won't be a problem. So I'm going to focus on creating more revenue in various ways. I know a lot of people, when the guy was, I believe was against Zip and Pippin because it was going to cost so much money. And now it's a big revenue gainer. So I'd like to find more ways to bring in revenue so that roads won't even be an issue.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Thanks. Road repair is really a #1 priority. The wheel tax is a short-term fix, as was mentioned earlier. And that's going to help clear the backlog of streets that were always pulled out after public hearings. Now, the backlog of those streets, that engineering has been done. It's not going to take a lot to get them back into the forefront and get those taken care of. As far as the 1% to 2% and the 3% that we're talking about, there's a lot more roads in Green Bay now than there was 20 years ago. You consider Red Smith. So if you're talking percentages, it's really not a fair way to even look at it. There's 480 miles of roads in Green Bay, not including the alleys. So if we're doing 1% to 2% now, 5 to 10 miles, and we're gonna bump this up to 3%, now we're talking about 18 miles a year of roads from here to Sobieski. That's what we're gonna pay within the city limits, without a plan. Because this past year, the city council and the mayor had approved a budget that maxed what they could physically raise the taxes to because of expenditure restraint. So City Hall has graded the streets. We have the backlog, and the priority is going to be to clear the backlog. And in the meantime, we really need to build the tax base. We need to fill empty storefronts downtown. We need to get more people in here, building businesses, and let them pay the taxes. Let these TIFs get a leash on the TIF and get those dollars back into the levy, and use that money then to make the street repairs really increase and get a lot more of those done.
Thank you. Mr. Martinson?
Every one of us up here knows what you want to hear. We're going to fix more roads for you. You'll hear 350% of what we do every year, 3.5 times, 4 times from these people. I want you to know that that cannot be done. I just want to prepare you that it cannot be done. We bond for our roads. We have $152 million of debt. 20% of the yearly tax revenue goes to service that debt. But don't worry, we're going to borrow that same amount of money this year.
Keep going.
Okay? We're going to borrow that same amount of money. So by the end of the year, we're still going to be $152 million in debt. We bond for the roads. We have slipped ratings from AAA to AA1. So if we're going to take out bonds to do 3 times the amount of roads, we're also going to pay for them at a much higher interest rate than we could if we had a better bond rate.
Thank you. Mr. Stoyer?
Thank you. This was a line item in our budget years ago, 10 to 12 years ago. We had this as a budget line item. It was taken out 10 to 12 years ago. Right now we have maybe $250,000 in our budget line item for potholes. That's it. So part of the deal is over the last 10 to 12 years we haven't raised taxes at all. And I equate it to the commercial, pay me now or pay me later. The fact is we have our backs to the wall. And a lot of us have talked that roads are one of our top priorities. And that's my top priority as well. I was looking at 3.3% over a 30-year period, which would replace all of the roads in the city of Green Bay. One of the things I'm also looking at is the wheel tax. Instead of having it a $20 per year item, that we would prorate it. The first year would be 20, then it would go down to 16, 12, 8, and 4 over a 5-year period. And the 6th year, it would be a line item in the budget, and we could just move along with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with much of what's been said. Obviously, fixing roads is a huge priority in the city of Green Bay. Needs to be. You know, my friend Dave Nennick, who's actually I think in the audience tonight, ran for mayor back in 2003. And he said, what this city needs is a capital improvement plan. Fast forward 15 years, we still don't have one. So that's a big piece of my platform, is making sure that we plan for and implement a capital improvement program that addresses all of these, like I said, roads needs for the city of Green Bay. But would also take into account some of those other issues that I had addressed. Another thing to keep in mind is, cities across the state of Wisconsin, cities and villages, have really been under the gun as a result of some policies that have been implemented in Madison. There's been a real reduction in shared revenue or municipal aids that have flown to local units of government over the last few years. So I plan to be a huge advocate with other local leaders all across the state of Wisconsin to raise the level of that discussion, to make sure that Green Bay and other communities similar to us are getting our fair share back from the state government and also from the federal government.
Thank you. Our next question goes to Mr. Evans first. How would you expand economic growth beyond downtown to other areas of the city of Green Bay?
Well, thank you. I like these softball questions because it goes right to the Evans plan. The number 2 priority of the Evans plan is economic development. So I really enjoy this. This is fun. Yeah. So of course, the downtown is at a point where it can grow organically. There is a plan in place. A lot of people probably haven't seen it, but it's a good plan. I'd certainly like to see a 15-story building in downtown. But let's talk about economic development. As I said, the downtown is at a state where we can move on organically. So what I want to do is look at the economic development. I'm going to concentrate and go to the evansformayor.org. Let's look at I-43 Industrial Park. We can expand to the south and to the east. Let's look at the University Commerce Center out by 54, 57. It's bare right now, almost basically bare. There's a lot of areas there. Certainly Military and Velp Avenues need a little bit extra help and boost there. So we've got some great opportunities. The manufacturers, I deal with lots of manufacturers. They are looking for additional manufacturing space. They're looking for lots of warehouse space. And of course, they're looking for office space. So we can really capitalize on that. The nice thing about industrial parks is that you can create tax base and not tax rate. So that's great. You can create family-sustaining jobs. And the incentives are very minimal compared to the incentives that you need to retain and grow businesses in the downtown. So thank you for the question. It's great.
Mr. Zimmer?
Well, the opportunities for growth are very limited. We're pretty boxed in. Outside of some land on the east side, the city doesn't have much potential for growth. And I feel it's very important that we look to make a better Green Bay, not a bigger Green Bay. You have to use your resources, your taxes that come in, for the things that serve people. And I feel that you look at the debt is huge. It's a lot of TIF debt. People say, oh, they're paying their own way. Not so. They get money, and then they use their taxes to pay back the money we borrowed to give to them. Well, okay, it's a way. If there's a hardship or something, I'm not against some incentives, but I think we need to have a little more faith in the free enterprise system and the people that want Green Bay to be a better place. And I think we have to concentrate on our services and our police protection so we have good people coming here and staying here. I'm worried about the flight from the city. A lot of people moving to Howard, Schwab, and Alloway, outside. It's because we're neglecting our inner cities to a great extent. We've made some efforts in there. It's not 100% one way or the other, but that's where we have to concentrate on keeping a good, solid inner city, and people won't be moving to the outside. We have to keep our good, solid citizens here.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Mr. Boucher?
Well, I'd like to increase the population of Green Bay at about 5 to 10% rate annually, which could require a tremendous amount of housing units. It would attract businesses, and I would like to build skywalks connecting the downtown businesses with the new university, with the community, up to 200 miles of skywalks. Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Hi. So there's some damaged relationships, between City Hall and some of their neighboring municipalities and other entities. And right now, it's especially so with developers. We're competing with Lawrence, we're competing with Howard, and even Bellevue, who are opening new subdivisions and getting new development, new housing. Every summer, there's more and more opening up. And, we have Grandview, which has an approved PUD in place right now. It's being assessed as an agricultural field. And there are 400 lots in that PUD, and those should all be assessed as individual lots. But there's some infrastructure issues that we can't seem to get taken care of. And the relationship has gotten so bitter that really the developers don't want to work with the city right now. And I think it benefits every single one of us to get that done and to get that property taken care of. There's also going to need to be perhaps some better marketing on University Heights, and I know that our economic development team has really gone out of their way to push that property. Maybe we need to look at it as perhaps another residential subdivision or as another use, another opportunity that might be out there. But really, once you start mending some of these relationships with the Brown County Home Builders Association, some of the other developers in the area, and you make development easy, they will come in, because Green Bay does have a lot of property, a lot of vacant property that is not being utilized the way it should be. Thank you.
Joe, can you define PUD for the crowd here? I saw
It's a planned unit development, and what that one is residential development. It's got a mix of multifamily and single-family homes.
Thank you. Mr. Martinsek?
Well, in order to expand the economic development, that's the question, right? How would I expand?
Yes. How would you expand the economic development beyond downtown to the other areas of the city of Green Bay?
Well, there's one area that I think is really ripe for that. It's currently zoned both industrial, commercial, and residential. It's the area between Lombardy and Walnut, from Ashland down to the river. I think that's an area that sort of occupies the distance between downtown and the stadium, and there's a lot of opportunities there. As far as creating new revenue sources for the city, I think a digital network would be good. The company I'm with, Youngsign, we partnered with the city of Chicago to create their digital network. Something like that is a much larger scale, obviously, than we could do here, but there is something that we could do here along those lines that I think would be a very easy, low expenditure that would immediately start generating positive revenue.
Thank you. Mr. Stoyer?
Thank you. Recently, the city of Green Bay passed a preservation ordinance. We've been working on this for almost 30 years. And what that's done is allow us to gather tax incentives and other monies for projects, adaptive reuse type projects. When you travel to another city, you don't go just to the strip malls and that. You go to areas in your downtown and other areas outside that are attractive and that you want to look at. Right now we have Belt, Military, East Mason, and University Avenues. Those are areas that the roads have been improved as of recent, and we need to start putting businesses in there that will draw to that area. I've voted on a lot of projects over my 7 years, and some of that has been in the downtown area. For example, the Larson Green project. I know there was a lot of contention about that. You know, it could have been a $10 million fix where we could have had right away. Instead, we're looking at a development that's $40 to $50 million down the road. Like a lot of times with citizens, they want instant results. Many times it takes time. Right now, Schwabenen is at 16% of equalized value with their TIFs. Green Bay is at 5%. We have room to expand. It's not just throwaway. So I think it's important. We're competing not only within ourselves, but we're competing with other communities around us. And I think it's important that we work better with the county and also these other communities. We need to be united in a lot of things. We will be stronger as that goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goodrich?
Thank you. Yeah, I would say, we're not done redeveloping or developing downtown. We still have some work to do. Jeff Marcus has talked about a modest target of 100 new units of housing every year for the next 10 years. I think that's a very reasonable goal, and I would love to actually see that happen. But to the point of the questioner, we still have a lot of work to do all across the city of Green Bay. Northeast side of town, that Grandview development, the University Heights, there really is room to grow out there. But to Joe's point, I have heard the similar feedback from folks in the development community, whether it's policies or personalities. I think our codes and ordinances really need a critical review. So that's why I'm interested in forming a task force within the business community to look at those rules and regulations, make sure that all of our safety and health standards are maintained, but that it's done in a way that is supportive of new business investment. Because you don't want to be in a situation where developers are not interested in doing business in this city. There's a lot of options in the county and beyond for people to do business, and we need to be on an equal footing with all of our partners in the area.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
The city does not, the city has a taxing problem. It does not have a revenue problem. We need more revenue in the city. And the only way we're going to get that revenue is through more economic development. Now, just recently, on the county board, I was one of the leaders in assisting bring Green Bay packaging development to stay in Green Bay. That was a $500 million project providing hundreds and hundreds of jobs to the Green Bay area. Jobs that will last probably for up to 50 years. That's the kind of leadership you need. I've talked to several developers that come off and just say they do not want to develop in the city of Green Bay right now. This is not, the city does not have the atmosphere for development. So with that, we need to reform our processes in the city, reorganize our staff to understand that the development we have is not enough. We need to not only develop or continue to develop downtown Green Bay, but look to the far east, the far west sides, Lombardi Avenue, the military corridor. With that, that's how we will make Green Bay a better place to live, work, and retire. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question goes first of all to Mr. Zima. What is the biggest issue facing the new mayor?
Well, I think it's, looking at the $4 million budget deficit that the previous mayors left us with, we have to start in a hole. But I think what's important is that we get economic development that gets on the tax roll. We have over 100 million that's off the tax roll. It doesn't go to the city, the county, or the school district. It goes to the TIF fund to pay back the subsidies that we provide for developers. We need to have a little more free enterprise. We need to open it up. I've had people who own a lot of rent units that say they don't want to own anything in Green Bay because of the atmosphere of inspection. Everything goes on. It's not that nobody wants slums in the city, but they've made it so uncomfortable, so uneasy for people. A lot of people don't want to develop here unless they got big subsidies. And most of our money is off the tax roll. And it's been used to pay for the mistakes that have been made. Instead of closing the districts, they've been kept open and they've used them as donor tips to pay for mistakes. We need to get that money back on the tax roll so that we can pay for the services that people need.
Mr. Boucher?
Well, downtown congestion is a huge problem. You have to wait for boats, you have to wait for trains, you have to wait for bridges that get stuck up, you have to wait for construction, you have to wait for lights, and then you go downtown, and what's there to see? There's a few things. We need to bring more attractions to the downtown. I'd like to bring 1 million more tourists to the downtown each year. We'll bring a lot of revenue to everyone. High tide raises all the boats. We can build like indoor atrium gardens like we have in Milwaukee, the Mitchell Domes. We can build sports centers. There's all kinds of ideas that I have. Just tourism in general and getting people. How do we avoid the boats and the trains? Well, we could build tunnels underneath the river, having more ways to cross the river. So when people get downtown, it's just not those 2 bridges. There's just so many opportunities to grow.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
I think the biggest dilemma is probably going to be rebuilding relationships rebuilding and strengthening a relationship with Brown County, because we need the county just as much as the county needs the city of Green Bay. We can't have egos and personalities getting in the way of progress for the Greater Green Bay as a whole. We need to repair relationships with the Oneida Nation. I would make it a goal to get a new service agreement, a long-term service agreement in place. That is a revenue source for the city, and it's a service that the Oneida Nation deserves to have as long as their properties are within the city limits of Green Bay. Neighboring municipalities, we need to have a symbiotic relationship between Titletown and the Legends District. The Legends District has great opportunity to the east of the Titletown District and east of the stadium. The last administration had a great relationship with the governor's office, and we need to continue that relationship. The next mayor needs to reach out to Governor Evers and his administration, and we need to make sure that they're paying attention to us. But mostly we need these strong relationships because the greater Green Bay area can be very, very powerful in lobbying. We have great local representation with our state representatives, and we've got a governor's office that will listen to us. And if we can get Schwabenon and Alloway and Pier and Lawrence and Green Bay and all of us on the same page for a cause, we have great power here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mortensen?
To my mind, the biggest problem facing the city is that we are in debt $152 million. I said it before, but I'll say it again. 20% of our yearly tax base goes to service this debt. You are effectively, as citizens, getting 80% of your tax dollar. It will get larger because we do bond for the roads, and nobody's talked about our water infrastructure just yet, and we're going to need to bond for that. There's also a public safety building that needs to be built. About a year ago, it needed to be built. So that debt will continue to grow, and as long as that debt sits at about 20% of the yearly revenue, we're in trouble. It needs to get down to about the 14% of yearly revenue range.
Thank you. Mr. Stroyer?
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Moore and Mr. Wardson kind of beat me to the punch on a few of these lines, which is good. But I think it is important for the next mayor to build the relationships with the county, rebuild them with the county, and also all the other communities around us. I think over time, a lot of these communities have, they avoided annexation by incorporating. So what's happened in effect is that we're stuck in certain areas. We can only develop to the east, which would be Humboldt and or Scott, and that may be a problem. One of the things I see for the mayor, the new mayor, I worked for the city for 26 years, and I was a lot younger and all that, but we were a family. We worked together, we played together, we did a lot of things together. I don't sense that as much at the city, and I'll be honest with you. I think one of the things that the new mayor has to do is rebuild that. Rebuild the fact that it's not just the paycheck and the benefits, it's also the fact that you enjoy doing your job. And like I said, when I worked for the city, I waited on 20,000 folks over time, and my goal was to make sure that they got all the information that they needed. If I couldn't get it for them, somebody else would. The business community as well. We need to make better relationships with them. A lot of folks don't want to work with the city anymore. That's a shame. We don't want that. We got to work together. Also, working with the Packers and the United Pride is very important as well. We need to talk about that. Right now, the Packers pay little or no tax to the city, and I think we really need to start looking at some of the ways that we can benefit not only for them, but for the city as well.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
A lot of good points have already been made, but I would agree with Mr. Moore's comments about electing somebody with a good relationship with the governor. But my answer to that question is it's a difficult one because there are so many priorities for the city. But I think the attraction and retention of young, talented individuals and empty nesters and sort of everybody in between is the highest priority. I think our Brown County Executive, Troy Streckenbach, is in the audience tonight. He's talked a lot about this as a priority for the county. Obviously, the Green Bay Packers have talked about the importance of that issue when developing their Titletown district. So that's going to be key, I think, to the health of our economic future and community health going forward. young people and empty nesters are really looking for those community amenities, which we've done a nice job of developing over the years. Our river deck is an amazing asset, Bay Beach, the Wildlife Sanctuary, Botanical Gardens, obviously what's going on with Titletown. But we really need to, continue to invest in those areas. The coal piles is another really important discussion that is ongoing, something I've been involved with at the state level with our county and city partners. If we are able to relocate those coal piles out to the mouth of the bay and free up 36 to 40 acres of riverfront property for development, I mean, that would be a really once in a city's lifetime opportunity. So those are the kinds of things that we really need to continue working on.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
Again, I'll go back to City of Green Bay does not have a taxation problem. We have one of the highest tax municipalities in Brown County. But yet, we can't balance our budget without going to our general fund. To me, that's a problem. Everything we're going to probably talk about here tonight is going to somehow be affected by our budget. And the next mayor is going to have to take a look at how can the city prioritize between needs and wants for their budget. They have to get their budget under control. And again, I am, with my background, being on the city council, doing the police personnel and finance, being a business owner, I know what it takes to dig in to get the job done. Until we get our budget under control and our taxes under control, a lot of what we talk about is not going to happen. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you. So the question is, what is the biggest issue facing the next mayor, correct?
Yes.
So, I'm a banker, finance, budget guy. That's what I do for a living. I help companies all over the world. That was what Mr. Buckley said. The city budget is the #1 issue facing everybody. It's facing the next mayor, but it's facing all the citizens as well. The city budget is almost in crisis mode, okay? You've got a massive amount of debt. You've got, 18, 17, almost 20% of the budget being utilized to pay down your finance, your debt. That's rough. So anything that happens, you can talk about the parks, you can talk about investment, you can talk about anything. But if you do not have a healthy budget, then none of that takes place, okay? Your streets aren't going to be there, your parks aren't going to be there, none of your developments. So you have to rein in the budget, and that is really key. It's just like you do at your home. I mean, if you want to keep spending, you're going to have problems. But you're going to have your budget, you know what your revenues are, you know what your incomes are, and expenses are. It just works for that. So, just like to point out that I have that experience, and I'm the only candidate up here running for mayor that has approved a budget that froze taxes, reduced debt, didn't borrow any money, kept all the services the same, and fixed roads. I'm the guy that can do that with my background. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, first of all, goes to Mr. Boucher. Yeah, Mr. Boucher. Right.
No, I started, but I'll talk again. I don't mind talking.
You got the first question, right, guys? Okay, so the next question goes to Mr. Boucher. Would you, as mayor, support evening and weekend hours for early voting, as well as expanding locations for early voting?
I would like to make voting accessible as possible to everyone, so I'm totally open to that.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Thank you. I think the challenges with this are, of course, going to always be budgetary issues, and that's what you're always going to hear. Nobody wants to hear that because voting does need to be accessible to everybody. And with recent, I guess, potential for the recent laws that came through. We don't know what's going to happen down in Madison now with what's going to be passed. But look, I mean, we were able to vote 4 weeks early. The city opened up voting 4 weeks early. We offered free transportation from UW Green Bay to get downtown. You know, I think on election day, we opened more polling places, and especially on campus where that was a big issue. I think that we had tried to resolve those issues as best we could. And we always done it by trying to stay within the budget. In my last budget with the city, I tried to put $30,000 into a contingency electoral contingency fund, and that was shot down by the council. Unfortunately, I do think it needs to be accessible, but I think we need to be wise about it. I really think that 4 weeks early, people should be able to get out and vote within 4 weeks. Now, weekend hours, maybe it doesn't need to be every weekend, maybe they need to be limited hours, but maybe on a Saturday or on a Sunday after church, City Hall needs to be open for 4 to 6 hours. I'm perfectly fine with that. Again, we gotta watch the budget, we need to be really wise about it.
Thank you. Mr. Mortensen?
I'm certainly all for the expansion of early weekend and evening hour voting. That's how I vote. That's how I voted for the last 12 years. It's much easier for me to find some time in the 4 weeks leading up to the election to get in and vote. Sometimes I just have stuff to do on a Tuesday. In addition to that, I've looked at other solutions that are being proposed in other countries, and the one that interests me the most is a way that people can, using what's called blockchain technology, decentralized ledger, to vote electronically. There's some problems with it, but they seem like they'll be worked out in a few years' time. I'd like to see things expanded, not just beyond hours and weekend, early time. I'd like to see things expanded to the digital world. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Stroyer?
Thank you. As I was doing research on this campaign, a lot of us have done a lot of work looking at producing databases and all sorts of things. Got something from the Government Accounting Board that showed that we have 37,000 voters, potential voters in this city. Out of that group, there was about 5,000 voters that vote all the time. Those are the people that you really want to get to. Granted, you want to talk to everyone if you can, but a lot of folks don't vote. You know, I think that's one of the issues. So having evening and weekend hours, I think, are important if we can do that. But I think part of it is on the voter themselves. They need to say, you know what, we are going to vote, and the demand will push the clerk's offices and these other folks to do something. But right now, we don't get a tremendous amount of voters. So with that being said, we have to be a little careful. Mr. Moore did mention that we, and council, it was shot down, that we had the chance to get some more money in the budget for that. The clerk's offices are overwhelmed when it comes down to this type of thing. So we have to be careful for that. Absentee is another way to go too, and I've started doing that recently as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kenrick?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of expanding on these opportunities. I really appreciate the league's work on this issue, advocating in Madison and other communities around the state. We need to be mindful of the budget constraints that enter this discussion, but Green Bay is the third largest city in the state. Communities like Superior, like Stevens Point, much smaller than we are, have made this possible. You know, we should be able to have weekend voting in the city of Green Bay, expanded evening voting. The advantage of having some weekend voting, you also have free busing on Saturdays, every Saturday in the city of Green Bay, so you know, some additional accessibility that way. But yeah, absolutely, I'd be a huge advocate of it. Certainly appreciate all the stress and the work that the clerk's office you know, has to deal with, and all the poll workers, but this is something that needs to be a priority.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes, as mayor, I would work with the city council and the clerk's office to see what the demand is for expanding voting hours as well as locations, and looking at it from more of a where does it make sense? When does it make sense? Taking a look at how much is it going to cost, because we do have a budget we have to follow. Do we have enough manpower to staff it? In some cases, the staffing of the voting places is a concern. So I think before we jump out and promise that we're going to expand voting hours and places, we have to take a look at all parts of it and then prioritize from there. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you. This is an interesting issue. I don't really see it as mayor as this being one of the priorities. I mean, I look at the budget, I look at roads, I look at economic development, I look at community. You know, it's interesting. We talk about, you know, expanding locations. The Green Bay Public Schools, which you used to be able to go vote at, you cannot vote at there anymore, if you've noticed that. So they didn't let us. So we have our own government entity that says we're not letting voters in anymore. So I have a little issue with that as well. So now it's gone to the, well, you go to the private schools, you know, we're in my district, you know, they have, you know, 2 precincts that are voting there basically, or 2 different wards, and that's a problem. So I look at, you know, I like Sandy Juneau, county clerk. She had sent some stuff out. There was things going on. She seemed to be against it. She's a smart lady. I really trust what she's doing. So I really would, you know, look to her for this. And you know, polls are open at 7 to 8 a.m. You can always go down to City Hall and vote. So this to me isn't this great of a priority. I do put a little bit of responsibility back on the voter to educate themselves on who's the most qualified, who goes to their viewpoints, and then for them to get out and to vote. So all this early voting, I don't know. It's something I probably would review, but I'm not. I think we're doing fine the way we are right now, and this is, to me, low priority.
Mr. Zimmer?
Thank you. Well, I look out in the crowd and I see some white hairs here. How many people remember when we used to vote only on election day? Or by absentee ballot. That was always available to anybody who might be traveling, who might be bedridden or whatever. That's always been available. It still is available. And I think if anybody in 4 weeks before an election can't figure out how to get an absentee ballot or go down to City Hall and vote if they want to, that's the way it should be. Here we're talking about $4 billion budget deficits. Now we're going to talk about spending more money. I mean, truthfully, what have we got to do? We're just going to go door to door and drag people to the polls? I think people that want to vote should be out there voting. And those that don't really, do we really want them voting?
Thank you very much. Our next question goes to Mr. Moore. As mayor, would you adopt a housing first model for homelessness, where people are provided housing that's able to deal with addiction, health concerns, and other issues?
I think that a Housing First program, I think it really needs to be earned. I think there needs to be some, again, you know, I talked earlier in my opening statement about public-private partnerships, grouping together, giving people the resources. I think first we need people that are willing to accept these resources. Look, we've got good shelters in Green Bay now with NEW. I was able to tour it last week and see a lot of their programming and see what really that place is all about. I will also tell you that I have a family member that is currently a homeless young man and has been for some time. And to be able to speak personally on this, which actually is pretty emotional actually, and to see at times a lack of effort to try to better yourself. I don't believe at times, and hard as it is to say this about your own child, that there's something that he's deserved by being lazy and by not wanting to work and not wanting to do this and just, you know, wanting to play video games all day long and being content with being homeless. Now, proud to say that young man has a job right now and he's been able to hold it for a few weeks. I'm very proud about that. And I think that when you start seeing those kind of efforts, that's when you really need to jump in and make sure that there's not a setback and there's no fallback. backsliding from where they're at.
Thank you. Mr. Mortensen?
The question again was,
As mayor, would you adopt a housing first model for homelessness, where people are provided housing, then able to deal with things such as addiction, health care, and other issues?
yeah, absolutely, I would. You cannot start building a person back up until you have their basic needs taken care of. If you're struggling to find shelter, to find food, to find medicine, that's the only thing on your mind. You cannot build new skills, you cannot build new confidences. So, yes, put them in a house, and then start building them back up. I've looked recently at a community of houses called tiny houses, small, little, one-bedroom, teeny tiny houses, no bigger than a camper. But they're serving homeless people in I think Milwaukee or city nearby, and they all live in the different houses, but they have a central meeting area. And each day they come and they eat and they pick up new skills that way. There's people coming in to these meeting areas, they're teaching them things. It's something statistically that seems to be working. After 6 or 8 months, these people are out into apartments and they're not coming back. Very early in the program, but that seems promising.
Thank you. Mr. Stoyer?
Thank you. As I replied earlier, I chaired the homelessness task force in Green Bay from 2012 to 2014. And what I found was, with the folks that I was working with, that there were 14 or 15 different causes for homelessness, which was a shock to me. I thought it was just maybe you're out of work, mental illness, alcoholism, a single parent. I mean, there's any number of issues that go into this. One of the most shocking things that I've ever seen in the city was when we went on a homeless head count along the Fox River, 3 in the morning, and we found a gentleman in a cardboard box living near the mouth of the river. And when we woke him up, he jumped up and he looked at us and he was in shock. He said, "I'm going to be late for work." And I just thought, that's not right. So the tiny houses, that's one thing, which would be an alternative. We've looked at also St. Louis, Kansas City, San Francisco. Our committee looked at a number of other places. And I think there's a lot of work that we can do with that. The big thing is, don't give them a fish, teach them how to fish. I belong to a group called Circles Green Bay. We're looking at poverty from a different standpoint. And basically we're teaching people, the person that is the group leader is the person that needs help. We give them the resources, the mentorship, they look at it and they decide how to go. And we've gotten people off of assistance with that, including homelessness.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron?
Yeah, I would be supportive of a policy like that. One of the sort of like technical terms used for that these days is permanent supportive housing. Because I think there were some programs started in the housing first philosophy that just provided housing and not the services that are so important, the drug and alcohol services, mental health, counseling that is so important for much of this population. NewCap is a nonprofit that has a presence in Green Bay and across Northeast Wisconsin, and they have a permanent supportive housing program that's been up and running, I think, for a little over a year, maybe more now. Would love to see the city study the possibility of cooperating with those efforts along with the county, because obviously they're a big human services provider in the area to implement a program like this. We receive millions of dollars from the federal government for housing purposes every year, and it's put to great use with Habitat and with NeighborWorks. But I think there's room to purpose some of that money for this cause as well.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
Yes, while working in the city police department, I dealt as a community police officer quite a bit with the homeless problem, especially because I worked in the Broadway area. And I worked with the shelters. I worked with a lot of the individuals. And it's interesting because some of these individuals, as I've said before, have a wide variety of why they're homeless. Some choose to be. Some have issues where they just are. I remember a gentleman back in the day, his name was Rooster, or anybody that's been around for a while. Rooster used to live in different doorways. And when it got to be really, really cold outside, he would then do something to get arrested to go to jail, so they have a warm place to spend a night. Probably, I would say 90% of the time, he chose to sleep outside, and that was his choice. But recently, I was asked to be on a subcommittee for the housing department, and they were handing out more vouchers at a request of one of the community groups. And I really enjoyed listening to what the community group was doing. They provide housing. You can't be on drugs. You have to maintain a job, and you have to go to their counseling services. And their goal is to help and make people be able to be self-sufficient. And that's where I think the goal has to be in a lot of these groups, whether it be shelters, churches, community groups, and families. We have to work on getting these people self-sufficient. So it's going to take a combination of efforts, not just from the city, but all the other groups involved.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Thank you. This is, if you go to the Evans plan, the number 3 issue is homelessness, and you'll address it there. But the question is, will we implement a housing first model? I was chairman of Human Services, I've been on Human Services, 12 years, 14 years, something like that. I think it was back in like 2006 or 2004. The Mayor Schmidt actually did put together a homeless task force, and I was on there. We brought in an individual from Washington, D.C. that talked about the housing first model, and we actually implemented it in Green Bay, okay? It didn't work, but it's a great model. The reason it didn't work is because we didn't have the right candidate. And I think now that we've evolved, and it's 10, 12 years later, and we have very good definition within the shelters in Green Bay. They all know what they're doing. They all have the purpose to run very well. I think we can find the right candidates for the housing first model. And I would be more than happy to absolutely implement that again. There's some transitional housing that you can look at. You know, NEW is doing a great job. And then, you know, because there's a lot of issues that go into homelessness, AOD issues, mental health, of course, financial. But maybe we take a step back. We look at the Alice report from the United Way. You know, I hope this community can really take and learn from that. As mayor, I understand what the Alice report is, and we have to make sure how do we prevent people getting into homelessness. But and that's more of that's more important than I'm sorry. We need to prevent people from getting homeless to begin with. But the housing first model is a good model, and it would work in Green Bay. We just need the right candidate.
Thank you. Mr. Zima?
Well, first of all, I don't think Green Bay should be expected to shoulder all the homeless problem. I mean, is that what we want, Green Bay to be a homeless mecca? I think the county has to get more involved in it. Almost all the homeless stuff is in the city of Green Bay. How do you build a nice, big, strong city with people that are coming from the outside? And I still maintain 90% of the people that come to our homeless shelters really are not people that lived here all along. They say, you know, oh yeah, if they've been in Green Bay a week, they're from Green Bay. I think we've been attracting people. I think we need transitional housing, and it's got to be on the form of there's a transformation house in Green Bay. But they help people that are really down, even people who have had felonies or anything else. But they expect them to contribute something every week. There has to be a model where people do something to get something. And I know that they've worked on this, but I think transitional housing for a fee, people can't come here and expect that everything's going to be given to them for free. That is not the kind of city I want to build. And I think this has got to be shared throughout the whole community. It's not just Green Bay's responsibility. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Boucher?
I would try to look at each homeless person as an individual human being, and they each have individual needs. And the problems that got them homeless are likely to arise again. So we need to find the root of the problem. The problem is drinking because they're finding alcohol everywhere. The problem is they're not inspired, they don't have a life, they don't feel part of society. We can make them an asset and not a detriment to our city.
Okay, our next question then goes to Mr. Mortensen. How would you improve public transportation? For example, bus lines with more accommodating hours, such as more frequent pickups as opposed to every 30 minutes, Also, availability for second and third shift workers. The current schedule runs from 5 in the morning until 10 in the evening. How would these improvements be funded?
Our transportation department is kind of an interesting thing. The Patty, the woman that runs it, is pretty adept at finding money from other places. State grants, national grants. She's a very impressive leader that we have with our team. We do need to expand the buses to at least be a little bit more in service on Sundays. The 1 hour thing, I've heard that that's difficult for people. I spent a little time a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon riding the buses around. I kind of thought it was a pretty great system that we have there. I'm inclined just to do what we have been doing and just do more of it. I don't have a longer answer for you, but I think it's great. I think it's going great.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stoyer?
Thank you. I had the opportunity to work with Metro Bus for a year as a dispatcher, and if you want to talk about a wild place, that's the place to be. 5 a.m. till 10 p.m. covers a lot of needs for a lot of people, but not everyone. I think one of the things I see now, when you see the buses, you see the different color lines, and unless you sit down and try to understand it, it's a little difficult. So I think part of it, the people that do ride the bus a lot, and these are people that don't have vehicles at all, and they have their needs, so they're out there. I would like to see more people use public transportation, not drive. Just use it. I used to, when I worked at City Hall, I took the bus. It took me 12 minutes to get from my house to downtown. That was a great thing. One of the things that I see, we try to get bus service into Howard. So folks that live in Green Bay could go into Howard and vice versa. Howard said no. And to me, that's not right. We have to work together as a community. So we need to look at all the various areas around and work together. So there are monies out there. A lot of it is federal subsidies, and there isn't as much locally. So it's a challenge. But I would say expand the hours a little bit. Maybe toward midnight for third shift. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I would certainly echo Nick's comments about Patty's leadership at the Transit Authority. She does a great job, and they're doing some really impressive work on tight dollars. We've seen real reductions in the state aid over the last few years, and it's made it really difficult to provide a robust transit service all across the city. The other disadvantage we face is we are an incredibly geographically dispersed community. We're roughly half the geographic size of the city of Milwaukee and only 1/6 the population. So it's just a real challenge when you're talking about building a healthy transit system when you have people that are so spread out. So we have a lot of things working against us, unfortunately. But I took the bus a couple months back with the kids down to the downtown Y, and kids had a great time. It's a great way to get around if you have the time for it. But this hourly service is really challenging. It's tough to make a big promise when budgets are so tight. There are some other communities though that are exploring the possibility of autonomous vehicles, autonomous buses. That's a few years out at this point probably. But I know that there are some communities in Wisconsin that are looking real seriously at some of that stuff and would love to explore them if viable.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
Yes. A lot of the funding for the Green Bay Metro is state and federal funding. A small portion really coming from the city of Green Bay. And I'm confident that a lot of the routes have been looked at, and they are trying to prioritize the routes. I know there's been routes that have been canceled due to lack of ridership. And I think that they're doing the best that they can with the amount of money they have. It's costly to run buses down the road. And I think that when we go back to earlier conversations about our budget issues, again, is this a need or a want? And how are we going to pay for it? We'd like to have buses running all over the city, all 24/7, but is it physically possible at this time with our current budget? No. We'd like to have other communities get on board with the busing, but they've chose not to. There's nothing the city can do about that at this point except continue to offer the services. So I would encourage people to continue to monitor this, and as the need is there, the adjustments will be made. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of what Mr. Buckley said. It's a huge expense. Most of the dollars are federal dollars. I like what Mr. Stoyer said. You know, you have to look at maybe going 5 a.m. to midnight. You got to really look at who is utilizing the service, and you know, on a kind of a macro generic definition, it's the working poor, students, you know, elderly who don't drive. So we can't penalize a group of people because they're working poor, or because they're students, or because they don't have the driver's license. So I don't like to do that. That's not a good government. That's not a way to treat your population. So it does go back to, if you can expand it, absolutely. But you know, we do have budgetary problems. I don't like penalizing somebody that's, you know, working third shift, or you know, is working poor, by not providing them an opportunity to get to work. We all talk about economic development. We all talk about how we love Green Bay. We all talk about how we want to help people, but then we're clamping them down at home because we're not providing them an opportunity to get to work, and so I don't like that at all. So this is something that I would say, if we can figure out to get more federal dollars, more state dollars, then absolutely that's something we need to do. Don't penalize the working poor. That's not the way to run a good government.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmer?
Well, as everybody said, you know, we depend on the federal government and the state government for about 80% of the transit budget. So, you know, we're restricted by those dollars, but I think we're looking at it the wrong way. I think we need to concentrate on providing more services within living areas. I lived in Green Bay at a time when half the people didn't even have a car. But there was always grocery stores nearby, pharmacies nearby, things that people need. If we want to have a functional city, we have to have those kind of services available. I think we're a great opportunity when the Walmart, I something to hate Walmart, but they were going to, you know, here we got all this housing downtown, and there's no grocery store, there's no pharmacy, there's no nothing. When I was a kid, there were 5 or 6 pharmacies on Broadway alone. A lot of small businesses and stuff like that, and I know it's gone outside, but I think we have to concentrate on, in the neighborhoods, providing the kind of services that people need so that they can live and not be dependent so much on transportation, so that a bus every half hour, every hour will meet their needs, because they'll be able to take care of most of their needs close to where they live.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
So the bus system needs to be fiscally responsible. I'd really like if we could teach the youth how to use the bus system. So many of them have never used it or don't know how. One more point. Yeah, if we increase the population, bringing people in from around the world who don't have jobs, who don't have cars, they can use the bus system, and it would make this bus system fiscally responsible.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Alderman Stoyer, we spent the first 6 years together on the council, and did we see bus routes come once a year or twice a year for full reviews and analysis to see how we could expand? It was a lot, and we've got our core routes, you know, Bay Beach, UW Green Bay, and the VA, NWTC, the airport, of course, is out there, the downtown, the Titletown district now, and you know, we really would like to be able to bring people from outside of our community to those places. We would love to have them come to those places within Green Bay. And some of these relationships that we have, you know, they need to be addressed. I would like to see our Howard residents come in and enjoy the Hotel Northland and take the bus in. Public transportation needs more riders. And when there's more riders, then there's more need. And of course, more need means better accessibility and better routes. I think that the first, second, and third shifts, especially after my tour of the NEW Community Center, I thought more and more about if right now we're running 5 to 10, if we were to run those routes from 6 until midnight, it's only adding an hour a day and really covering 3 shifts. And I think that might be a good first step for us.
Thank you. Our next question then will go to Mark Steuer. As mayor, would you be willing to approve funding to help fight the opioid crisis? And would you be willing to create a task force?
Well, I'll tell you what, over the years, we've had Brown County Drug Task Force, we've had our city council, we've had police. I've ridden with the police on an evening where I witnessed 2 attempted suicides. One of them succeeded, sadly, which makes me feel that I don't want to be a police officer. That's a tough job, and I commend anybody who's done it. I would say yes, we definitely have to look at that. I think a lot of times, we just had to deal with medical marijuana issue. Even though locally we really can't do a lot, there are certain things that we're looking at. But the opioid epidemic is an epidemic, and it is a problem. So I would be more than willing to form a task force and work with Brown County and some of the other communities around to see what we can do to lessen that. So I would say yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kovac?
Well, as Alderman Steuer said, there is an existing drug and alcohol task force within the county that looks at a lot of this work. The county itself is the largest human service provider, obviously, in the area, in the region. So they're the real experts when it comes to some of these topics. We would certainly be interested in cooperating with the county and other interested groups on this. It's a huge crisis, not just here in Northeast Wisconsin, but all across the state and nation. If there's a problem with the police department, having enough Narcan, that's certainly something to look at. But it's an issue. I absolutely would be interested in taking a look at it.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
Well, given my background as a retired law enforcement officer, I spent numerous years working in the drug task force. So I know firsthand the effects of the different drugs that face our community. While working on patrol, I've seen people that have overdosed. I've seen people die. I've seen people go to the hospital and watch them get their stomachs pumped. I've seen people try to be revived. So to anybody sitting up here today, I fully understand and I'm fully willing to take the lead on anything that has to do with drugs and the drug problem facing our community. Thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you. As mayor, would I approve funding to fight the opioid crisis and create a task force? No, I would not. I'll tell you why. It doesn't fall under the purview of the city. Mr. Streckenbach is here. This is a good question for the county executive forum that we're going to have. That's where it belongs. The Health and Human Services Department in the county, that falls under their purview along with the Sheriff's Department. Then, of course, all the other municipalities can get involved as well. But this is, certainly we have an opioid crisis. We get that. But this is a county-wide, if not a regional, if not a state, if not a national issue. But it is not a city of Green Bay issue that we should be addressing. We only have so much time, so much energy, and so much money. And this issue is a county issue. I can tell you, I've been on human services for 14 years, 16 years, I think, and I know what categories things fall into. It's not, unfortunately, it's just not a city issue. It's a county issue, and certainly as mayor, if somebody wants to create a task force, we have people that are interested from the city of Green Bay to sit on there, or our law enforcement, hospitals and clinics, that'd be great, but I wouldn't support any funding from the city budget. We can't afford it, and it's not under the purview of the city.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmer?
Well, certainly it's a problem that crosses all income levels. But, until we get a death penalty for drug pushers, I don't know how it's going to get better. The county, some of my fellow supervisors here, we have always voted and added money to to the drug task force. And, you know, they say they put out one fire and there's 2 more started. We have to have something to stop this stuff from coming into the community. And I pledge certainly cooperation with any task force they put forward, but I think we just have to keep strengthening that side of it and make it very uncomfortable for people who are dealing in drugs to live in Green Bay. I think the less of those type of people we have here, the better. We need a very strong police force to really stomp on them. It's not just the Brown County Task Force, they got the whole county to deal with. And our city police do work with them. But I think we need to beef up that part of our budget. Safety in the community, you heard me say that when we started tonight. The safety of the community is the most important thing, and that means police protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
Yeah, I see the opioid crisis and alcoholism, drunk driving. A lot of social issues are symptoms of a society that's in a rut. And if the government was more of an entertainment committee and kept people busy and happy and get their lives going, keep them on track. If you're inspired and you care about things, you're not going to waste your time on drugs. Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Thanks. You know, we had a semi-local state representative, of course, who had opioid issues in his family, and brought really a series of laws and statutes down in Madison, which of course passed and had a lot of bipartisan support. But how has any of that really affected us here in Green Bay? I think we need to take a look at those and see what we can do to benefit. Now, creating a task force, I don't know that that's really necessary. Funding a task force, certainly not. This could be just as simple as having members of your police department and fire department and adding to their job duties, seeking assistance from federal and state, you know, just like you'd have a grant writer. And just make that a part of their job. And okay, your job is to quarterly give us a review of what is available for us to apply for, where we can put toward this issue. Again, funding a task force, really, how many task forces are we going to have? We've talked about 3 or 4 different task forces already. They've all got to answer to somebody, and I just don't know that we can handle all of that. We're getting an awful lot of government here. So, thank you.
Mr. Bartonstead?
I agree with Joe in a lot of ways that some of these task force, especially the prevalent, they're just sound and fury and indicative of nothing. To solve the crux of the problem with the opiates, it's not the Vicodins that you know about. It's this very cheap chemical that is much more powerful than Vicodin or something like that, called carfentanil, and it's shipped here into the United States. Drug sniffing dogs cannot be used to find it because they will die. So a little bit of this stuff goes a long way, and too much of it will kill you. The way that other cities have dealt with this is by usually writing grants to make sure that this chemical called Narcan, which is the drug that binds to your opiate receptors and keeps you from getting high while you're on it, that seems to be the approach that people are taking. I think ideally we'd want to have at least a couple of doses of those in every police car, at least a couple doses of those in the libraries, gas stations, and make it easy for people to acquire that stuff within the city.
Our next question then goes to Mr. Kenridge. The mayoral candidate pool is clearly not very diverse. Yet the city of Green Bay is diversifying rapidly. What will you do as mayor to build community and leverage the power of diversity for the benefit of Green Bay?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We are a very diverse community, increasingly so every day. One of the things that I've talked a lot about on the campaign trail is making it clear to everybody that Green Bay is open and welcoming and supportive of people of all backgrounds, with all experiences and all points of view. The mayor also obviously is in a position to appoint department heads and other staff people to serve on boards and commissions. I feel like our department heads and our boards and commissions should look like the city of Green Bay. Robin Davis from United Way has been very active with the chamber in promoting CEO pledge, diversity and inclusion pledge. Would be happy to sign that on my first day in office to make it clear that the city hall is a place that is open and welcoming and supportive of all individuals. We talk a lot, and I've talked tonight about the importance of retaining young, talented individuals, and this is a key part of that. People are really mobile these days, so they always have been, but increasingly so. And we are going to lose young, talented individuals if they don't feel as though Green Bay is an open, vibrant, diverse, supportive community. And so, the mayor obviously has a microphone, has a platform, has a bully pulpit, and I will absolutely use it to deliver that message every day. That we are open to all folks who are interested in doing good. If you are interested in doing good, Green Bay is a place for you.
Thank you. Mr. Buckley?
As a whole, the mayor should be focused on improving public safety, expanding economic opportunities, strengthening our infrastructure, and making the city a place where people from all walks of life want to come live, work, and retire. Over my years in business, I've dealt with a lot of diversity. I've worked and employed people from all walks of life, all races. And I think that is important to have a great community, again, where people want to come and grow this community. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Zimmer? Oh, Mr. Evans, I'm sorry. My apologies. You're next.
This reminds me of we were on public safety, and this is how we sat together. Going at it.
My apologies.
No hay problema. Yo pienso que sí, esta es una pregunta muy importante para nuestra comunidad, ¿no? Y yo trabajo con muchas personas y en mi negocio yo tengo no sé cuánto, 25 personas que se habla español y ellos viven en todas las partes de nuestro mundo. Okay, so I'll go back to speaking the language that most of us will understand here. So, candidate, I certainly have a very strong relationship in the Latino community, and I have a great relationship with the Roma community as well. So I also signed the Chamber, the Diversity and Inclusiveness Pledge as the CEO, the Vice President. But I'm going to give you an example. And what it is you can talk a good game about diversity and all this stuff. When I was a director with First Security Credit Union, I was recruited to go to Wells Fargo to run the university, as a VP to run the university location. Part of my deal moving from First Security to Wells Fargo is that I brought two people with me. They were both Latinas. And I brought them with me not because they were Latinas, but because they were fantastic at their job. And then when I got there, I went and I hired about 16 to 20 different Latinos. And I did that not because they were Latino, I did that because they were qualified and it was the right thing to do for that business, and I grew that branch into one of the most profitable branches in the Midwest for Wells Fargo. Not because it was about diversity, because I hired the people that we needed to have. They just happened to be Latino. That was perfect. Gracias por su tiempo.
Mr. Zimmer?
Nosotros vamos a falando portugués, ¿no?
I can be really brief on this. I think we've got to treat everybody equally. What's the golden rule that we all grew up on? Giving others as you want them to do to you. And I think as long as we keep that attitude, things will go okay. And I welcome you. I'm married to a person who was born in Brazil, but she's been in this country 49 years. Makes a tremendous contribution to our community. She was a teacher, she's a great, great person. And most people are. It's just a few that make it back. So I just say we got to treat everybody equally. And yeah, the golden rule, that's what's important.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
When I was at the Georgetown University Law Center, there were some guys who came talk to me about Diversity Week and then what we should do for Diversity Week. And I was talking to them and I was like, I found out they were in charge of it, and I was like, why are you talking to me? And he said, well, you're considered the authority in the building on diversity. And I was like, why am I the authority? He said, because you talk to everybody. I said, doesn't everybody talk to everybody? And they're like, no. And I said, well, I noticed, but I didn't really want to say anything. But I'd really like to increase the population, bringing people from all over the world, bringing Rohingyas and Africans and Venezuelans and Hondurans and anybody who'd like to come to Green Bay. I'd like to increase the population, give people opportunities, and build that university for diversity downtown. The state needs a university dedicated to diversity.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
All right. Over the last few local elections, you've seen Alderperson Dorff, Alderperson Corpus Dax, Supervisor Borchardt. You've seen some females take out some long-term incumbents, and that was it was cool. It was neat, and I enjoyed serving on the city council with Alderperson Dorff, who was fantastic. The Old North Neighborhood Association was a defunct association, and it was put back together by Rosa Herrera, who is the first Hispanic female president of an association, and she continues to hold that together. I think with the powers of the mayor, we do have appointing power to put people onto committees, with approval of the council, of course. And I think the expansion of the neighborhood associations is extremely important because that is a great channel for public input on the policies that the council and the city is creating. And so to continue to grow that, and look, the neighborhood associations, they are what they are. People can come in, try them out. If they like them, they can stick around. If they decide that it's too much government for them, they can walk. But it provides an opportunity for every single resident in the city to get involved, sit on a board, and kind of see how everything works. So I definitely think we need to continue to grow the neighborhood associations and encourage participation in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mortensen?
One of the things that I'm proposing in my platform is to bridge the gap between our regular city council of not quite dead old men and the no offense, guys. I mean no offense. Dinosaur. To bridge in high schools there's an intra-city student council. We have a regular student council. We need to have what I think is a junior city council, 18 to 26, to bring in, to draw from the minority communities, to try to teach these people about the city issues and about the process of going ahead and becoming an elected representative. I think that's important. You know, I didn't seek outside financing for my campaign. I'm financing it all, but I still did form a campaign committee called In With the New Green Bay. And at the end of this, I'll take some of my money and I'll keep it into that. We'll change the idea of the 501, and it's going to go to finding young candidates and supporting them for city positions.
Mr. Stryer?
Thank you. I grew up in Milwaukee. I was living there when we had martial law, when we had riots in the late 60s. I went to high school in that area. I remember how tough that was. I remember working at American Motors as a student, and it was like the United Nations. I learned a lot about people just living there, so from a bigger city. When I first got elected, a person called me and said, "Mark, what are you going to do about the Somali situation?" And I thought, what are you talking about? And how I answered it, my son is sitting in the back. I might embarrass him. But I thought of my son. I said, what if my son was sitting on a Russian half-track with an AK-47 driving around Mogadishu? The bottom line is that I think every family, no matter who they are, race, ethnicity, persuasion, anybody wants safety for their families, for their friends, for their neighbors, period. So that's the way I look at it. Judge a person by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, persuasion, and other things. So That's it, thank you.
And thank you very much for your questions. We have a multitude of other questions. I believe most of these people do have websites, so please email your questions to them. I'm sure they'll come up with some answer.
Can I get a
We
break?
would-
I have to use the restroom.
We're going to take 2 minutes to wrap up. Is that okay?
You can go first.
You are third in line.
How about I just go now and
Go ahead.
Hey.
I will let you go now. Watch your step. Okay, Mr. Kevich.
Well, thanks again to the league and to all who turned out tonight. This has been a really great discussion and opportunity to get to know all of us, get a feel for what we think and how we might govern. As I said, I've been blessed to be the state representative for the 90th district for the last 6 years. I left that position to run for mayor because I am truly excited about where we are as a community. And I'm running really to take the city to the next level. We have so many opportunities in front of us, so many amazing people and organizations and businesses that are located in this community that are interested in doing great things. I've said before that it takes a village to run a city. This is not a position that one person can do on their own. But I'm really proud of the breadth of support that I've developed throughout this campaign, the variety of ideas and initiatives that have been presented to me and incorporated into my platform, something that I'm really excited about implementing. In politics, I think there's a pretty stark divide, not necessarily between liberals and conservatives, between idealists and cynics. And I'm strongly in the idealist camp. I feel so confident and optimistic about where we are as a community and would love to play a leadership role in leading us into a very bright future. So thank you so much again for attending. I really appreciate all of your time. Please reach out if you have any questions or input.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
Oh,
Start.
are you going backwards?
Yes, we're right on
Well, thank you to the league.
that. I'm sorry.
What are we doing?
We're going,
Okay.
we started that way,
All right.
we're going that way.
That bathroom thing threw me off. All right. Well, thank you to the league for having this wonderful forum. I do want to reiterate that I am running as an independent. I do not have all these business connections. I don't have a hidden agenda. I've served as a city employee for 26 years. I've been on city council for 7. I was vice president for 2 terms. I'm president now. And I feel that our council is quite civil. I think we're doing some very good things. I've been part of 7 budget cycles, so I feel that I have a handle on that. I just want to end with a statement that John Kennedy made some years ago. He said, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." And I want to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoyer. Mr. Martinson?
As I mentioned in the introductory comments, I work at a company called Jones Sign Company. We're a Green Bay company. We've been here for about 110 years. And in the last 7 years, we have embraced a new paradigm in decision making, as far as resources go, that relies on data. And in business, this is called business intelligence, data-driven decision making. In government, it's called a smart city. It's the all-encompassing term for it. And what happened to us at Jones Sign Company is in 2011 we had 110 employees at one location, and as 2019 arrived, we have 500 employees at 15 locations around the United States. this way of doing business, this way of making decisions, is the way forward. We won't be having a ton of retail from now on. Amazon has seen to that. We're going to have to find some new ways to generate revenue, but we're also going to have to find a way to spend money efficiently as we possibly can. And if you're using the data to drive those decisions, it becomes not only easier to know where you're spending and what you're doing with that money, transparently showing what you're doing with that money, but much earlier on in the process, can you determine when you're making a mistake in spending your resources? And that's the greater part, almost, of a smart city. We do too much throwing good money after bad.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Talk about an experience. I'm a 6-year alderman for the District of Green Bay. Decided not to run this past April, and I really missed not being a part of policy making. Maybe something not quite clicking right in my head, but I enjoy City Hall a lot. A 6-year representative on the Redevelopment Authority and the Funding Subcommittee. Chaired the Finance Committee. I was Vice Chair of Parks, Rec, and Forestry, Improvements and Services, and Personnel, and currently I'm a Commissioner at Green Bay Water Utility. Also as a 2-time Chair of the Joint Finance and Personnel Budget Committees. It means nothing without having good people to help you along. When you vote for me for mayor, you are voting for my family for mayor. I was a late entrance into the candidacy with a Christmas Eve announcement, and the reason being is that my wife and I had pretty serious conversations about what this job would entail. Most important part of my candidacy is that my wife is not supporting me, she is not standing behind me, she is not pushing me along. My wife is standing alongside of me. When you vote for me, you're voting for my family. My 8-year-old daughter knows more people in City Hall and can navigate that building better than 3/4 of the people in this room. She's been to more ribbon cuttings, and she probably knows more about policy. Look, she's going to be a great leader in this community one day. I'm vested. My family is vested. As I said in the opening statement, every candidate brings something to the table, and a good leader for the city is going to take the best of those ideas because we cannot allow them to die. I want strong relationships with our neighboring communities, Brown County and the United Nations. I do have a city-first attitude, but at the same time, I will welcome any entity to the table to talk. And at a minimum, I will offer the respect of listening to them. Thank you very much for this night.
Mr. Boucher?
I would like the city to grow, and we can do that, with building a university downtown, giving the city a heart and soul, attracting tourism downtown. We're talking about money here, but it's trivial amount compared to the amount we could make if we really dedicated ourselves. There's just so many opportunities. We're gonna have youth are gonna grow up, and they're gonna be high-speed rail here within 20 or 30 years. We need to prepare for things like that. There's potential for a bridge to be across Lake Michigan within that much time. There's potential for like a canal, Green Bay to Kiwani. There's so many ideas to build and make money. We're all sitting here fighting over nickels and dimes when there's millions of dollars out there that could be money in our pockets, and we could all retire rich.
Mr. Zimmer?
Well, I have to say that I'd like to be the mayor for the average taxpayer that I believe is getting the short end of the stick for a long, long time. I've got experience, I've got knowledge, and most important, I've got courage. I provided leadership, and I want to provide a voice to all of the people, including those that haven't been heard. I want a safe city. As I said, this is the 3rd time I'm saying it. I really think that is the top priority. What good's a good street if you don't have a safe street, a safe neighborhood to live in? I think that the tax money needs to be used for the services of the people. not just to enrich developers, which I think have been over-enriched. I think we need to restore basic services, like bulk pickup. We talk about rides in the neighborhood, this sort of thing. We used to have a real clean city. I think morale has to be restored in our police department. We need to put the officers back in place. We got to make it a place where people want to be police officers in Green Bay. I think we've squandered a lot of opportunities. And I think I'm a creative person and I've been a problem solver all my life, and I believe that I'm best qualified to really solve the problems facing the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans?
Thank you. Well, I thank everybody for attending tonight. I hope you realized, as everything was going on, that I did focus and directed my answers to the specific question that was asked. And I do that because that's my personality. You're hiring the next president and CEO of Green Bay. Okay, that's what your vote does. So, for example, I am not qualified to pick up the garbage in Green Bay. I don't have a CDL. Okay, I'm not qualified to pick up the garbage. I don't have a CDL. But I am qualified to be the next mayor. And that's important. You have to have somebody that has the qualifications. I have a bachelor's degree in business. We talked about this. Master of Science, Organizational Leadership and Quality. I've ran multi-million-dollar organizations. I've done business around the world. This is a $100 million budget with all these employees, all these services. You need somebody that understands this. I do. Certainly, the community aspect. I've worked at, as I said, I won some great awards, community impact award from United Way. I mean, these are some big awards. We have to focus in on, we heard a lot about, well, we'll do this and we'll do that. I hope you come away with, and you heard Pat Evans has done this. Pat Evans did do this. So I have that relevant experience that you need as a mayor. And that's important. So the education, the community involvement, the local government experience. I understand the local government. I've been in it for 17 years now. And in good positions in local government. I built a community treatment center. I secured $22 million for the KI. The only candidate that voted for a budget that froze taxes, kept your services intact, reduced the debt, didn't increase bonding, and fixed roads. You need to use your vote to hire the next president and CEO with the best qualifications. And that's me. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Buckley, thank you.
Again, thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the forum, as well as all of you coming out tonight to listen, engaged in this process. I'm asking for your vote to be the next mayor because I believe I'm the only candidate who has the background and proven ability to get the job done. As a husband, father, retired decorated police officer, a proven local business owner, and a dedicated public servant, I am one that gets things done. I'm asking for your vote because there's a lot of work to be done in the city. I believe we have to strengthen our public safety. As I said before, public safety is key. Revamp our city's infrastructure, highlighting we have to fix our roads, and expand economic opportunities for all of our residents. We need to create an environment with great education, increase private investment in jobs, and a tax climate that's attractive for all people to want to live, work, and retire in the city of Green Bay. We have a city that families come together, and businesses alike, to watch the city grow. I have demonstrated throughout my entire career how to get things done, and I'm committed, as your next mayor, to be the one to get it done. So I humbly ask for your vote February 19th at the primary to be the one of two to go on to the April 2nd general election. Thank you, and have a great night.
I'd like to thank very much the candidates for being here this evening and answering the questions. And as I mentioned, there are lots of questions that were not answered this evening, and I'm sure you'll be getting a rash of them via email. I would like to thank Karen Schlick for organizing this event, and the League of Women Voter members for assisting her. As was mentioned, the primary election is February 19th. Be sure you get out to vote. Thank you very much.
Thing on? Oh man.
Trying to get some nice behind the back shots here.
Alright, make sure you don't shoot at my raging boner, alright?
I think it's good. You get a wide range.
Ready?